She married her family's greatest enemy to end a war, but what happens when she falls in love with the man she was meant to destroy? Broken heart fire. Isabella Russo stood behind the heavy oak doors, fingers trembling around her bouquet. The white orchids felt like a mockery of purity. Every bloom had been imported from Sicily, her father's doing, of course. Everything about this wedding had been planned, purchased, and polished to perfection. Everything except her heart. Outside those doors waited the men her family had warred with for years, the Morettis. She could hear their laughter, cold and clipped, laced with the kind of arrogance that comes from survival. Somewhere among them sat the man she was about to marry, Adrian Moretti. She'd seen his picture before. Dark hair, sharper eyes, the kind of face that could have belonged to a fallen angel or a hired killer. Rumors said he was both. He was the Moretti heir, raised on secrets and strategy, blood on his hands before he was old enough to drive. The doors creaked open. The sound echoed through the cathedral like the cocking of a gun. Every head turned. Isabella took a breath that barely reached her lungs and stepped into the light. The organ began to play, slow, solemn, a requiem disguised as a wedding march. Her father's men flanked the pews on the left, Adrian's on the right. Between them stretched a carpet the color of old wine, dark red, like the peace it was meant to symbolize. She could feel their eyes on her. Suspicion, calculation, hunger. Some looked at her with pity, others with contempt. They all knew what she was, not a bride, not a symbol of love, but a bridge built from flesh and fear. And then she saw him. Adrian stood at the altar, dressed in black. No tie, no smile, no softness. His eyes found hers and held, steady, unreadable. For a moment, the world seemed to still. The music faded. All she could hear was her heartbeat and the faint metallic click of a guard's safety being disengaged somewhere in the crowd. She wanted to run, but the aisle was a tunnel of loaded promises. So she walked. Each step was a negotiation between life and death, between loyalty and dread. Her veil trembled against her lips as whispers rippled through the crowd, the last remnants of a war no one had truly won. When she reached the altar, Adrian didn't offer his hand. Instead, he nodded once, a silent acknowledgement. A transaction complete. The priest, pale and sweating under the weight of what he was about to sanctify, began the vows. His voice wavered. "We gather here today to unite two families." A murmur of laughter cut him off. It came from one of the Moretti men, low, derisive. A Russo bodyguard twitched, hand drifting toward his jacket. Instantly, a dozen guns shifted, silent threats beneath tailored suits. The priest froze. Adrian raised one hand, calm, commanding. The movement was minimal, but every weapon lowered as if obeying an unspoken law. His control terrified her more than the chaos. "Continue," Adrian said quietly. His voice was smooth, deep, the kind of voice that could charm a confession out of a sinner or deliver an execution without blinking. The priest cleared his throat and continued. Isabella tried to focus on the words, but they slid through her mind like oil. Every syllable felt wrong. To have and to hold. There was nothing to hold here except fear. For better, for worse. It was already worse. When it was her turn to repeat the vows, her lips moved automatically. She didn't even hear her own voice. All she could see was the glint of Adrian's watch, the reflection of light on metal. His hand was steady when he slid the ring onto her finger. Too steady. Then it was his turn. "I, Adrian Moretti," he began. The room held its breath. "Take you, Isabella Russo." He paused, just for a heartbeat, long enough for her to feel it, the hesitation that wasn't nerves, but calculation. "To be my wife." His eyes met hers again. And in that gaze, she saw no affection, no warmth. Only purpose. His vow wasn't love. It was vengeance. The kiss was brief, cold, mechanical. The audience applauded politely, but the sound was hollow. Somewhere near the back, someone muttered in Italian, "May God forgive this union." Outside, the sky had turned the color of smoke. The photographers clicked and flashed as the new couple exited the cathedral, flanked by guards. The families followed behind, pretending to smile, pretending this wasn't a funeral in disguise. When they reached the waiting car, Adrian opened the door for her. A gesture that should have felt chivalrous, but his eyes were ice. "Mrs. Moretti," he said softly as she slid inside. "You'll find that peace is just another kind of war." The car door shut with a heavy thud. Inside, the silence was suffocating. She could feel his presence beside her, still, composed, but dangerous. The scent of his cologne mixed with gun oil and something darker, something like smoke. "Did you want this?" she asked finally, unable to keep the tremor from her voice. His gaze stayed fixed on the road ahead. "Want has nothing to do with it." He turned to her then, and for the first time, she saw the faint scar that curved along his jaw, a reminder of battles she didn't yet understand. "You should smile," he added quietly. "The photographers are still watching." So she smiled. Perfectly, painfully. Outside the tinted window, she saw her father watching from the church steps, his expression carved from stone. For the first time, she wondered which of them had truly sold her father, for power, or herself, for peace. As the car pulled away, the church bells began to ring. Their chimes were meant to sound joyous, but to Isabella, they tolled like warnings. She looked once more at the man beside her. His hand rested on his thigh, inches from the gun hidden under his jacket. She wondered if he was thinking the same thing she was, that this wasn't a beginning. It was a countdown, and when it ended, one of them would be standing over the other's grave. Welcome, my beautiful family and friends, to my YouTube channel. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. Now back to the story. The Moretti mansion was too beautiful to be real. Marble halls that echoed like cathedrals, chandeliers heavy with crystal and silence. Every surface gleamed, every painting watched. And yet, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that beneath all that luxury, something was rotting. She walked its endless corridors alone, her footsteps soft against imported rugs, her reflection flickering in the mirrors that lined every wall. The Morettis had a taste for opulence and surveillance, beauty used as armor. Even the mirrors felt alive, as if the house itself was studying her, waiting for her to slip. She had been in this house for 3 days. 3 long, quiet days where her husband, Adrian Moretti, had barely spoken to her. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't kind either. He was something worse, unreadable. At breakfast, he would sit across from her at the long oak table, sipping espresso in perfect silence while she forced herself to eat under the weight of his calm. The servants never looked her in the eye. They moved like ghosts, careful not to make a sound, as if noise itself could provoke punishment. Once, she'd asked one of them where the east wing led. The woman's hands froze mid-motion and she whispered, "Don't go there." No one mentioned why. That night, she wandered anyway. The east wing was darker, colder. The scent of tobacco lingered, old, masculine, laced with something metallic. Her footsteps echoed against the stone until she stopped before a closed door. From inside, she heard voices, low, tense, male. "The Russos think the marriage changes anything?" a voice hissed. "Let them think it," another replied, Adrian's voice, smooth as smoke. "We play the part until it's time." Her heart stuttered. Time for what? The doorknob turned suddenly. She fled before it opened, her pulse drumming in her ears. When she reached her room, she locked the door and pressed her back against it, shaking. Somewhere beneath the diamonds and vows, the truth was starting to show. This wasn't peace. It was a setup. The next morning brought blood. It happened during a stroll through the gardens. The bodyguards trailed them, 2 shadows in black suits. The sun was sharp that day, slicing through the hedges, painting the roses crimson. Adrian walked beside her, silent as ever. His hand brushed against his jacket every few seconds, a reflex she'd learned meant he was armed. She tried to speak, tried to find something human in him. "Do you ever regret it?" He didn't look at her. Regret what? This life. He turned then, his eyes catching the light, silver, sharp, emotionless. Regret is for men who had choices. The words chilled her more than the breeze. Before she could reply, a rustle broke from the hedge. A sound too quick, too precise to be the wind. Adrian's body moved faster than thought. 1 second she was standing there, the next she was slammed to the ground, his arm tight around her shoulders as the gunshot ripped through the air. The bullet struck the marble fountain behind them, shattering it into white dust. Adrian was already firing back. 2 clean shots, no hesitation. The silence that followed was deafening. The guards sprinted into the trees. Isabella could taste blood in her mouth, not hers, but fear made metallic. Adrian pulled her up, checking her for wounds. His fingers were steady, his voice calm. "You're fine." Her heart wasn't. He glanced toward the shattered fountain, then to her. "You need to stay inside from now on." "Who was that?" she demanded, her voice shaking. He didn't answer. He holstered his gun and turned away, his tone flat. "Someone who doesn't know the war is over." She wanted to believe that. But when he walked back to the house, she noticed it, a faint tremor in his hand as he wiped the dust from his sleeve. Not fear, not guilt, something deeper. Recognition. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The image of him, the way he'd moved, shielded her, fired with precision, replayed over and over. He'd saved her life. And yet, somehow, she felt more trapped than before. Restless, she left her room and wandered downstairs. The mansion was silent, bathed in silver moonlight. She followed the faint glow spilling from a half-open door, the study. Adrian was there. He sat at his desk, sleeves rolled, a glass of whiskey in one hand. The other held a match. Before him lay a stack of letters, old, yellowed, sealed with wax. She froze in the shadows as he struck the match and watched the flame lick across the paper. The wax seal melted, revealing the Russo crest. Her father's name was inked across the top. "Adrian," she whispered without meaning to. His head snapped up. For a moment, the firelight carved his face into something inhuman, too beautiful, too dangerous. He didn't look surprised to see her. "Couldn't sleep?" Her voice trembled. "Those letters, why are you burning them?" He studied her for a long, unbearable silence. Then he said, softly, "Because lies deserve fire." He dropped the last letter into the flame. It curled, blackened, vanished. She stepped forward. "What lies?" His eyes narrowed. "The ones your father told me about how my brother died." The world tilted. Her throat went dry. "Your brother?" "Died in a warehouse fire." His tone was almost casual. "Your father called it business. I call it murder." He stood then, moving closer. The air between them seemed to vibrate, fear and something else, something dangerous. "Do you know what it's like," he said, voice low, "to marry the daughter of the man you swore to destroy?" Her breath caught. "Then why do it?" "Because peace," he murmured, brushing a stray curl from her face, "looks better with a wedding ring." The gesture was tender, but his touch burned. His fingers lingered for a second too long, and for that second, she forgot the fear. But when he stepped back, the warmth vanished, replaced by a cold, deliberate distance. "Good night, Isabella." Her name sounded like both a warning and a promise. He left her standing there, the ashes of her father's letters still smoking in the glass tray. She didn't sleep that night either. In the silence of that mansion, surrounded by mirrors and ghosts, Isabella realized the truth. She didn't know her husband at all. And the more she wanted to, the more dangerous it became. Because in this house, every secret had teeth, and every heartbeat was being watched. The days after the fire in Adrian's study bled together in silence. The Moretti mansion was quieter than ever, too quiet. The kind of quiet that hums with tension, where every breath feels like it could trigger something violent. Isabella learned to move carefully, to listen before turning corners, to sleep lightly. Adrian wasn't avoiding her. He was watching her. He'd appear in unexpected places, the balcony at dawn, the dining room at midnight. Always silent, always composed. His calmness was worse than rage. It made her wonder if the storm had already passed, or if it was still gathering. And every time their eyes met, she felt it. That dangerous pull, that flicker of something human beneath all the cold control. But she hadn't forgotten what she'd seen. The burned letters. The accusation. "Your father killed my brother." It echoed in her mind like a curse. One afternoon, she slipped away from her escort and found herself in the library, an old, sprawling room lined with dust and memory. She had begun to notice things others overlooked: missing books, sealed drawers, secret locks. The Moretti estate wasn't just a home. It was a vault. She ran her hand along the spines until one felt wrong, thicker than the rest, slightly warm. She pulled it. The shelf clicked open. A hidden compartment. Inside, a single folder. Yellowed edges. Her father's name stamped across it in fading ink. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside were photographs, black and white stills from years ago. A warehouse. A fire. And 3 bodies. Adrian's brother was among them. The report read, "Explosion caused by chemical ignition. Suspected arson. Ordered by Carlo Russo, her father." The words hit harder than a gunshot. Her knees gave out, and she sat on the cold floor, the folder trembling in her hands. She remembered the night it must have happened. She was 13, woken by sirens, her father's coat soaked in rain, and something darker. He'd told her it was nothing. Business. Business had a body count. And now, she was married to one of its casualties. When she looked up, Adrian was standing in the doorway. She hadn't heard him come in. He never made a sound. His eyes flicked to the folder in her lap. No surprise. Only quiet recognition. "You found it," he said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's true." He didn't move closer, didn't soften. "You tell me, Mrs. Moretti. You know your father better than I ever did." Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to look away. "He told me the fire was an accident." Adrian gave a hollow laugh. "Of course he did. Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, rising to her feet. "Why marry me if you hate everything my name stands for?" His gaze hardened. "Because hate needs proximity." Her stomach twisted. "You mean revenge." "I mean justice." The word cracked like thunder in the still air. He walked closer, each step deliberate, controlled. "My brother trusted your father. They were allies once. The warehouse wasn't just a deal gone bad, it was a trap." He walked in expecting a shipment and walked out on fire. "Stop," she whispered. "Do you know what he smelled like when we found him?" Adrian's voice broke, low and raw now. "Smoke and gasoline." She flinched. The pain in his voice was real, too real. "Your father ordered it," he continued. "And now I'm married to the daughter of the man who burned my blood alive." Her throat tightened. "You married me to punish him." "I married you," Adrian said, his voice like a blade, "to make him watch his legacy crumble from the inside out." Silence stretched between them, heavy as ash. But beneath the fury in his eyes, she saw something unexpected: grief. And behind that grief, something even more dangerous: hesitation. Because if he truly wanted to destroy her, he would have done it already. Instead, he stood there, torn between vengeance and the ghost of something he couldn't kill. That night, the rain came. It started as a whisper against the glass, then grew into a storm. The house seemed to breathe with it, shadows pulsing across the walls. Isabella stood by the window, the folder still clutched in her hands. She didn't know whether to burn it or bury it. Every page felt like poison. When she turned, Adrian was there again, quiet, as if summoned by her thoughts. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his hair damp. "You shouldn't walk around with that," he said, nodding toward the file. "It's not safe." "Safe?" she snapped. "In this house, nothing is." He didn't argue. He just watched her, eyes dark and unreadable. "You hate me," she said finally. "But you saved me. Why?" He hesitated, the first crack in his armor. "I don't know," he said after a long pause. "Maybe because I don't want your blood on my hands too." For the first time, she saw the man behind the legend. Not the Mafia heir, Not the Avenger, but a man haunted by ghosts he couldn't bury. He stepped closer. Whatever you think you know, Isabella, it's worse. Your father isn't just guilty. He's still lying. What do you mean? He made a deal before the wedding, Adrian said quietly. He traded your hand for his safety. But he never told you what he gave me in return. Her pulse spiked. What did he give you? Adrian's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile.
A name. Someone inside his own family.
Someone who betrayed him. Her breath caught.
Who?
He leaned in until his voice brushed her ear. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. The words sent a shiver down her spine. Before she could speak, thunder cracked overhead, and the lights flickered out. For a moment, they stood in darkness. Two enemies bound by the same storm. When the generator hummed back to life, he was gone. Only the faint scent of smoke lingered. Hours later, Isabella crept into the study again. The fireplace had gone cold. The folder lay open on the desk, but now there was a new paper inside. Fresh ink. A name she recognized instantly. Luca Russo. Her brother. Her hands went numb. Adrian's voice echoed in her mind. He gave me a name. The realization hit her like a blade. Her father hadn't just traded her. He'd betrayed her brother to save himself. Tears blurred her vision as she sank into the chair, shaking. Upstairs, she heard a door close. Adrian's door. And for the first time since their wedding, she didn't know who she feared more, her father or her husband. Because one had destroyed the past, and the other was about to destroy everything that came after. The night began with silence. And silence, in the world Isabella lived in, always meant something terrible was coming. She sat by the window of her room, the same one overlooking the courtyard where white roses grew beneath iron gates. The moonlight made them glow, delicate things surviving in a house built from violence. She wondered how long before even they were gone. The clock struck midnight. Somewhere in the mansion, a door slammed. Then another. And then gunfire. Sharp, sudden, thunder in the dark. The first bullet shattered the window beside her, sending glass across the room like falling stars. She hit the floor, heart pounding, as more shots tore through the night. The attack came fast. Ruthless. Whoever was out there wasn't sending a message. They were here to finish something. She heard shouting downstairs. Adrian's men. Then Adrian's voice, low and commanding, cutting through the chaos. Keep her upstairs. Lock the doors. Her door burst open a second later. One of the guards, Marco, motioned for her to move. But before he could speak, a bullet found him. He fell without a sound. The world tilted. Smoke. Screams. The smell of gunpowder thick in the air. Isabella ran. She tore down the corridor, barefoot, her nightgown fluttering like a ghost's shroud. Another shot cracked, wood splintered beside her. She didn't stop until a hand caught her wrist and dragged her into a side room. Adrian. His face was streaked with blood. Not his, not all of it. A gun in one hand, the other gripping her so tight it hurt. What are you doing out here? He hissed. I didn't. He pulled her behind a column just as another bullet tore through the doorway. Stay down. Outside, the sound of engines, cars screeching to a halt. The Moretti estate was under siege. Who is it? She whispered. He didn't answer. His eyes flicked toward the window. Russos. Her stomach dropped. My father? I told you, Adrian said coldly. Peace never lasts. Another explosion rocked the house, the east wing this time. Firelight spilled across his face, turning his eyes molten. He raised his weapon, fired twice, then pulled her to her feet. We have to move, he said. Now. They ran through smoke and shadow, through a mansion that had become a battlefield. Every corner echoed with gunfire, every hallway lined with fallen men in suits who'd once toasted their union. Adrian led her into the cellar, stone, cold, silent. The air smelled of wine and dust. He bolted the door behind them. For the first time in minutes, there was quiet. Isabella's breath came in sharp, trembling bursts. She turned to him and froze. Blood. It seeped through his shirt, looming dark across his ribs. "You're hit," she gasped. "It's nothing. You're lying." He tried to shrug it off, but when he moved, pain twisted his face. His knees buckled. She caught him before he fell. "Sit down," she ordered. Her voice shook, but her hands didn't. She tore part of her sleeve, pressed it against the wound.
He winced.
"You're wasting your time. Be quiet." The words surprised them both. She worked fast, steady, using her scarf to tighten the bandage. His heartbeat thudded beneath her fingers, strong, steady, human. The same heart she'd sworn to hate. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he said, quietly, "Your father sent them." She froze. "You don't know that." He did. Her throat tightened. "You don't know everything about him." "I know enough." Silence again. The kind that hurt. Her hands lingered against his chest longer than they should have. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for once his eyes weren't cold. Something inside him cracked. Maybe it was the pain. Maybe it was everything they'd lost to this life. "Why did you save me?" she asked softly. He met her gaze. "Because I couldn't lose you too." The words hit her harder than the gunfire. She tried to look away, but he caught her chin, forcing her eyes back to his. "You hate me," she whispered. "Maybe," he said, "but not enough." Their faces were inches apart now, the air between them heavy with things they couldn't say. The cellar was dim, lit only by the flicker of a single candle. His hand, blood-stained and trembling, brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Adrian." He didn't wait for the rest. The kiss came like lightning, violent, desperate, inevitable. Her hands tangled in his shirt. His breath caught against her mouth. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't kind. It was years of rage and grief and longing colliding in a single, broken moment. When they pulled apart, both were shaking. "This is wrong," she whispered. "I know." And yet neither moved. The sounds outside, sirens now, distant but closing, seemed to fade. For that heartbeat, there was only them. He cupped her face, thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "If they find us here," he said, "they'll kill us both." "Then let them," she murmured. "At least I'll die knowing the truth." "What truth?" "That I stopped hating you." Something flickered in his eyes. Not victory, not relief.
Fear.
Because he felt it too. Outside, the gunfire started again, closer this time. He stood, grimacing, grabbing his weapon. "Stay behind me. I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice." He moved toward the door, every step dripping strength he didn't have left. She wanted to stop him, to hold him, to scream that she didn't care whose war this was anymore, but the words wouldn't come. The door rattled. Voices shouted. He turned back once, meeting her eyes. "Whatever happens tonight, Isabella, remember I tried to hate you." Then the door burst open. Gunfire erupted. She screamed, diving for cover. Adrian fired back, hitting one, then two. A third man rushed in, and she, without thinking, grabbed the fallen gun from the floor and fired. The silence afterward was deafening. 3 bodies lay still. Smoke drifted through the air. Adrian turned to her, chest heaving, blood seeping through his bandage. His eyes locked on hers, shock, then something deeper. "You shouldn't have done that," he said softly. "I just saved your life." He took a step closer, cupped her face with a trembling hand. "No," he whispered. "You just doomed yourself." The candle flickered out, and in the dark, their hearts beat in the same rhythm, love and fear, one and the same. The morning of their anniversary dawned quiet, too quiet for a house that had seen war. Isabella woke to the hum of rain against the windows and the soft ache in her chest that never left anymore. Adrian was already gone. His side of the bed was cold. She ran her hand across the sheets, as if the fabric might still hold his warmth, his scent, something human she could hold on to before the day tore it away. The air felt heavy. Even the light seemed suspicious. When she reached for her robe, she noticed it. A folded envelope slipped beneath the door. No stamp, no name, just her. Her pulse quickened. She broke the seal with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet, the message scrawled in her father's hand. That same bold, perfect script she'd seen on her childhood report cards, on birthday notes that always came with money and lies. Finish what we started. That was all it said. 3 words. But they burned like a confession. She stared at the page until her vision blurred. She didn't need a cipher. She knew exactly what it meant. Tonight. Their anniversary dinner. The setup. The end. Her father wanted Adrian dead, and she was the weapon. The dining room had been transformed. Candles glowed from silver holders, their reflections dancing off crystal glasses. Outside, thunder rolled over the cliffs, swallowing the sound of the sea. It looked like love. But love had become a performance. Isabella sat at the table, staring at the empty chair across from her. Adrian was late, something he never was. Her fingers traced the rim of her glass, the red wine staining her skin like blood. Every sound made her flinch, the creak of the floorboards, the whisper of the storm. She could feel her father's eyes on her even though he was miles away. His command echoed in her head. Finish what we started. A pistol lay hidden beneath the silk cloth beside her. Cold. Silent. Waiting. Her stomach twisted. She didn't know if it was fear or guilt or both. When Adrian finally appeared, he looked almost peaceful. His suit was dark, his tie undone, his hair damp from the rain. But his eyes, they held a storm of their own. Sorry, he said quietly. Business ran late. He took the seat across from her, poured himself a drink, and raised it in a mock toast. To us. She forced a smile. To us. The clink of glass echoed like a countdown. They ate in silence, the kind that weighs too much to bear. The only sound was the rain and the soft hiss of the fire. When she finally looked up, she found him watching her. Not with tenderness, with calculation. You've been quiet, he said. So have you. Maybe we're both thinking the same thing. Her throat tightened. And what's that? That tonight feels like the end. Her fingers slipped on the fork. Adrian. He leaned back, eyes never leaving hers. I know about your father. The words landed like a knife. What? The message he sent. He reached into his jacket and tossed something onto the table, a crumpled piece of paper identical to hers. Her blood went cold. I intercepted it before it reached you, he said. But I wanted to see what you'd do. Whether you'd tell me. Her heart hammered. You think I'd. He cut her off with a look. I don't think. I know. The air cracked between them, sharp as gunfire. Adrian, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, he said. You were his insurance policy. Marry me. Earn my trust. Wait for the right day. He stood, slow and deliberate. Happy anniversary, Isabella. She rose too, voice trembling. You're wrong. I didn't know what he planned. I swear to you, Then why did you stay silent? Because she had loved him. Because she still did. Because love, for her, had always been a battlefield where truth went to die. I was afraid, she whispered. Of him? Adrian asked. Or of me? She couldn't answer. The silence between them was answer enough. He moved closer, and she could see it in his eyes. The war inside him. Hate and heartbreak locked in a deadly embrace. Do you have any idea, he said softly, what it's like to love someone you're supposed to destroy? Tears burned her eyes. I do now. For a moment, everything stopped. The storm, the fear, the noise. There was only them, standing on opposite sides of the same ruin. Then he reached into his jacket. She mirrored him without thinking, pulling the pistol from beneath the tablecloth. 2 weapons. 2 hearts. 1 breath. This is how it was always going to end, he said. Then let's end it together, she whispered. They stood there, husband and wife, lovers and enemies, framed by candlelight and thunder, each waiting for the other to move first. She saw the flicker of hesitation in his hand, the tremor in his jaw. He couldn't do it. And that was the problem. Because neither could she. The door burst open. Marco stumbled in, alive, bloodied, shouting, Boss. They're here. Gunfire ripped through the hall. In the chaos, Adrian grabbed Isabella, pulling her down as bullets shattered the table. Glass exploded, candles fell, flames catching on the tablecloth. Smoke filled the air. The mansion burned. She tried to crawl toward him, coughing, reaching for his hand, but he was already on his feet, firing back, rage pouring from every shot. When the last bullet fell silent, the world was nothing but firelight and falling ash. He stood over the bodies of her father's men, chest heaving. She rose slowly, gun still in hand, tears streaking through the soot. Adrian, he turned to her, eyes dark, haunted. You should have told me. I tried. No, he said, voice breaking. You loved me enough to lie, but not enough to choose me. Her grip on the gun tightened. And you loved me enough to test me, but not enough to trust me. They stood there, staring at each other through smoke and betrayal. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. He took one step closer, lowering his weapon. If you ever loved me, he whispered, leave before I change my mind. She looked at him one last time, the man she'd married, the enemy she'd fallen for, and realized there were no sides anymore. Only ruin. The pistol slipped from her hand. She turned and walked into the rain. Behind her, the mansion burned. And in the firelight, Adrian watched her go, knowing the war wasn't over. It had just become personal. The mansion was no longer a home. It was a battlefield. The storm outside had found its twin within. Wind screamed through shattered windows, dragging curtains like torn wings. The chandeliers bled sparks. And over it all, the staccato roar of gunfire. Adrian ducked behind a marble pillar, the air thick with gunpowder and betrayal. His men were dead or dying. Shadows moved through smoke, his father-in-law's soldiers, relentless, silent, merciless. He reloaded with trembling hands. Every echo sounded like Isabella's name. He didn't know where she was. He only knew he had to find her before they did. Upstairs, Isabella ran barefoot through the corridor, her silk dress torn and blood-streaked. The world had collapsed into chaos, gunshots below, fire creeping up the stairwell, smoke clawing its way toward her lungs. She held a pistol with both hands, the same one she'd once pointed at Adrian in that cursed dining room. It felt heavier now, heavier with guilt. She turned a corner and froze. Marco lay sprawled across the hall, eyes open, unmoving. The man who had once teased her about her accent, who had brought her roses from the garden every morning.
Dead.
Tears burned her eyes, but she didn't stop. There was no time for grief in a house full of ghosts. Downstairs, a voice echoed her father's.
Cold.
Commanding. Find my daughter. Bring me Moretti's head. Her breath caught. She pressed her back against the wall, the smoke swallowing her in its dark embrace. Adrian burst from the library, firing blind into the corridor. A figure darted toward him. He almost pulled the trigger, until he saw her face. Isabella. She ran to him, hair tangled, eyes wide with terror and relief. They're everywhere. He sent everyone. I know. His voice was ragged. We need to get out.
There's no way out, she said.
The house is surrounded. He looked toward the windows. Gunfire flickered outside, brief bursts of light in the rain. The gates were blocked, the drive filled with dark figures. Then he saw it. The back stairwell leading down to the wine cellars, an old escape route he'd used once before when the police raided his father's estate. He grabbed her hand. This way. They ran, ducking low as bullets tore through the walls. Wood splintered. Glass rained down like deadly snow. Halfway down the hall, a grenade exploded behind them. The blast threw Isabella off her feet. Adrian caught her mid-fall, shielding her body with his. The world roared and went white. When he opened his eyes, everything was smoke.
His ears rang.
He could barely see her face through the haze. Isabella, he whispered, shaking her shoulder. Stay with me. She coughed, blood on her lips. I'm fine, she lied. He pulled her up. They stumbled down the stairwell, every step echoing with the ghosts of the past, the night of their wedding, the first lie, the first kiss. At the bottom, the cellar door was locked. Adrian kicked it open. Inside, shadows shifted. 3 men waited, her father's soldiers, guns already raised. Adrian fired first. 2 fell. The 3rd shot back. The bullet missed him, but not her. The sound that followed didn't feel real. Isabella gasped, staggered, and looked down. A dark bloom spread across her chest, staining her dress deeper than red. Time fractured. Adrian caught her as she fell, his knees hitting the floor with a thud that shook his soul. No, 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 his voice cracked, trembling like a child's. Her fingers found his face. Adrian, don't talk, he choked out. You're going to be fine. But she smiled, that same fragile smile she'd worn at the altar, when fear was the only witness. I told you, she whispered, love would get us killed. He pressed his hands over the wound, desperate, shaking. Blood soaked through his fingers.
Why did you do that? He shouted.
Why would you? Because you wouldn't, she murmured. And I couldn't watch you die. Her eyes fluttered. The gunfire outside faded into a dull, distant echo. For a moment, there was only them, husband and wife, enemy and lover, the world burning around them, yet utterly still. He pulled her close, forehead pressed to hers. Stay with me, please. Her breath came slow, shallow. Do you still hate me? The question broke him. He shook his head, tears streaking through the soot on his face. I never hated you. I hated what loving you turned me into. Her lips parted in a faint smile. Then maybe it wasn't for nothing. The cellar door burst open. Her father stood there, flanked by his men, gun drawn. Move away from her, Adrian. Adrian didn't look up. You did this, he said softly. She made her choice. Adrian's rage erupted, years of blood and grief exploding all at once. He turned, firing with perfect precision. One by one, the men fell. Her father fired back. The shot grazed Adrian's shoulder, but he didn't stop until the old man fell too, eyes wide with disbelief. The silence that followed was worse than the gunfire. Smoke curled through the cellar, thick and suffocating. Adrian dropped the gun and crawled back to Isabella.
Her pulse was fading.
Hey, he said softly, his voice breaking. It's over. She blinked slowly, her gaze unfocused. No, she whispered. It never ends for people like us. He took her hand, pressing it to his chest. Then let me end it with you. Her last breath trembled against his skin. And then, stillness. Adrian stayed there long after the flames reached the cellar. He held her in his arms as the fire licked at the walls, as smoke wrapped the world in black. Outside, the storm began to die, leaving behind a hollow quiet. When the sirens came, distant and too late, they found only the ruins of the Moretti estate and the charred remains of an empire built on love and lies. Adrian staggered out through the wreckage, bloodied, broken, his eyes hollow. He carried her wedding ring in his fist, the only thing that hadn't burned. He walked into the night, past the bodies, past the memories, until the firelight was nothing but a flicker behind him. And for the first time in years, he felt something close to peace, the kind that comes only when there's nothing left to lose. The world ended in fire. And yet, somehow, Isabella survived it. When she woke, the light was blinding. The scent of antiseptic replaced the smoke that had once filled her lungs. She blinked against the white ceiling, confused, half convinced this was some cruel dream before death finally came to claim her. But the pain was real, sharp, raw, alive. Her body burned. Her heart even more so. A nurse appeared beside her, voice gentle, careful. You're lucky, she said. You were found by the cliffs. The house was gone. Isabella tried to speak. Her throat felt like it had been scorched. Adrian, she rasped. The nurse hesitated. Then, softly, no one else was found. The words hit harder than the bullet ever had. She turned her face toward the window. Outside, the city lay quiet, shrouded in morning rain. Somewhere beneath that gray sky, the empire her father built and the bloodline Adrian swore to avenge were both nothing more than ash. The war was over. But victory had left no survivors. Weeks passed. The newspapers called it the Night of Reckoning. 2 Mafia dynasties annihilated in a single storm, a legacy of violence erased by its own fire. The headlines spoke of justice, of fate, of a new beginning for the city. But Isabella knew better. There was no justice. Only ghosts. She spent her days in silence, her body healing as her soul unraveled. Sometimes she dreamed of him, of the way he said her name like it was both a prayer and a curse. Sometimes she swore she could still smell the smoke on his skin. The doctors said she'd been found clinging to debris in the river that ran below the cliffs. That she'd stopped breathing twice before the ambulance reached her. But no one could explain how she'd lived. She didn't believe in miracles. Only punishments disguised as second chances. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she returned to what was left of the Moretti estate. The ruins still smoldered, blackened walls, twisted steel, the hollow skeleton of a life once gilded by sin. She stepped carefully over the debris, her boots crunching on broken glass. Every corner whispered memories. Laughter turned to screams, vows turned to lies, love turned to war. By the fireplace, or what was left of it, she found a small metal box, half buried under ash. The lock had melted, but the initials engraved on the lid were still visible.
AM.
Her fingers shook as she pried it open. Inside lay a folded letter, edges charred, the paper stained by smoke and something darker, maybe tears. She unfolded it carefully. Adrian's handwriting. Bold, precise. Just as she remembered. Isabella, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it out. Or maybe I finally stopped running from what I deserve. I once thought revenge was all that kept me alive. That if I burned the world that destroyed my family, I'd find peace in the ashes. But then I met you, and peace stopped feeling like silence. It felt like breathing again. You were never my enemy. You were my only salvation. If I could do it over, I'd walk away from the blood, from the power, from every lie that made me who I am, just to spend one day with you without fear. Don't let them bury you in their sins, Isabella. Leave this city. Start somewhere the Russo name means nothing. Somewhere the ghosts can't follow you. And if you ever think of me, don't remember the man who killed for love. Remember the man who finally learned what it meant to love enough not to kill.
A.
The words blurred as tears fell onto the page. She pressed the letter to her chest, feeling her heartbeat against his last confession, as if somehow, across time and death, he could still feel it too. For a long while, she said nothing. The wind moved through the ruins like a whisper of forgiveness. Then she stood, eyes dry, resolve sharp as glass. Adrian had been right. Staying meant dying slowly, chained to the ghosts of 2 names that had poisoned everything they touched. So she left. Months later, in a small coastal town far from the city, the sea wind carried the scent of salt and new beginnings. Isabella rented a tiny apartment above a flower shop. She kept to herself, wrote under a false name, and spent her mornings walking along the shore where no one knew her past. Sometimes, she'd see a figure in the distance, tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair tousled by the breeze, and her heart would ache with that cruel, familiar hope. But it was never him. Still, every evening, she lit a single candle by the window. Not out of mourning, but memory. Because love like theirs didn't die. It simply learned to live in the dark. One rainy night, a letter arrived. No return address. No name. Just a single white envelope, edges damp from the storm. She hesitated before opening it, her heart suddenly heavy, wild. Inside, a single line written in Adrian's hand. Love outlives blood. You did too. There was no signature. Just those words, a promise, or maybe a ghost's goodbye. She pressed the paper to her lips and smiled through her tears. For the first time since the fire, she felt light. She walked to the window, candle in hand, and let the rain pour over her face. The city she'd left behind was gone. The war was over. But love had found a way to live. If love can destroy empires and still survive the fire, would you risk everything for the one person you're meant to hate? Please share your thought in the comment section. Thank you for watching my story to the end. Please subscribe, like, and share the video. Click on the screen to watch the next one because it's more interesting as this one.